So this morning we continue on with our Love Has a Name series. And all of us have, some ideas. We've had some ideas about our lives and how we saw everything playing out, how it was all going to go. And I want to, as we start this morning, I want to share a few of mine that I always thought things would work out a certain way. When I was younger, I had this idea that I was going to be an NFL quarterback. I just knew that I was going to get to college, get my scholarship. I was going to be a star, All-American in college. Then I'd get drafted number 1. I was going to win a couple Super Bowls on my way to being inducted into the Hall of Fame. I knew that was going to happen. Before I got married, I had these theories about how to have an amazing marriage. And I thought my spouse was just going to be so blessed to have such an enlightened husband. I'm glad that you guys are catching the sarcasm there. Before I got into pastoring, I just thought I knew how to handle every complex situation that would be thrown at me. And I just knew that all of my ideas about ministering to our community together, they were going to set the world on fire for Jesus. And then ahead of having kids, here comes the big one, right? I had all these kinds of thoughts on how I was going to parent. And I was going to raise the best obedient children, right? And I was going to have all these ways of creating an environment and a home full of peace and full of harmony. Yeah. On and on the list could go, right? Yeah. This has not worked out well, right? And I'm sure that you could add a few, and maybe you've thought of a few separate ones that you would add to that list too. But what is the truth, why we're chuckling about this, is that we all learn is that our ideas, our theories are great. They're great until, of course, they have a head-on collision with reality. The infamous Mike Tyson says it this way. He says, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Reality has a way of smacking us in the face a little bit, doesn't it? See, how we picture things playing out is rarely the same as how they actually go. And this truth absolutely applies to our interactions with people. Because loving people is really simple in theory. But in reality, it can be really, really difficult. Thankfully, we do learn from Jesus that love goes further than just ideas. Because as you see up here on the screens, love is a verb. And if that doesn't make you think of DC Talk, you're either too old or young, right? Because there's a certain group of us. You know what I'm talking about, but that's a side note. So chances are, as we read the text earlier in our time together, chances are you've heard of the greatest commandment before. And if that doesn't ring a bell, many times we also will refer to this as the golden rule. But either way, in Matthew 22:35, Jesus is approached by a religious person, specifically a Pharisee, and specifically one who is an expert in the law. And he brought Jesus a question in order to test him, in order to put him in a really tough or in a bad spot. And one bit of information about this interaction that's good for you and I to know is that at the time of this interaction, there were 613 commandments enforced by the religious leaders at that time. 613. You think mom and dad's rules were bad or are bad if you're still in a house with your parents? 613. And if you were a good and righteous person, the whole thing was that you were supposed to follow them all because that's how you stayed holy. That's how you remained faithful. So this religious expert's question was an attempt to trap Jesus because he wanted to make him look bad or at least discredit him in front of these other people. So he asked Jesus, he says, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Said a different way, think about it like this. Of the 613 different laws that lead to righteousness, which is the most important to follow? Goodness. Jesus' reply was this. He said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments." So Jesus takes all of these rules, he takes all the laws, all of the commands, and he makes it really easy to understand. Just love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Simple, correct? I mean, this is a colossal statement from Jesus. Jesus is saying that there aren't these 613 rules anymore. Now there's just 2. And that should be easy enough for all of us, right? Man, that should be really good to hear. Anybody can just keep these 2 rules. See, love, in theory, like this, it's so simple, isn't it? Loving your neighbor and loving people as you would yourself sounds so straightforward. And if this is all it takes, if these are the only commands and all others hang on these, then I think we're going to be okay. But we've discussed this before, and it was about a year ago now, that we know in reality love gets quite messy, doesn't it? Hear this from the book of wisdom in Proverbs 14, specifically verse 4. And this is out of the NLT because I just like the way that said it a little differently. It says this: without oxen, a stable stays clean, but you need a strong ox for a large harvest. Kind of straightforward. Basically, if you want a clean barn, don't keep any animals. Duh. But don't expect an abundant harvest either. Now, I don't want to compare you or I to ox or to animals this morning, though maybe some of you are as stubborn as an ox. I might resemble that remark a little bit, okay? But here's the thing. If you want if you want a problem-free life, just keep other people out of it. Duh, right? But like the proverb says, don't expect any of the benefits either. See, for all of us, these commandments to love God and to love others truly develops when we have a renewed heart via what I would call a continual experience and encounter with the living God, which is Jesus Christ. And you see, when this occurs, the commands to love our neighbor as ourselves, it's not seen as some order to be obeyed in our own doing and in our own strength. And it is also not found in the simple or the simplistic outward actions that conform to some proper standard. This isn't just a big addition on the to-do list, and we talked at length about that during our Sermon on the Mount deep dive. It's not more of the to-do list. Rather, these 2 commandments are experienced as invitations. They are experienced as promises to a new way of life, a new way of living in which piece by piece, our pride, our harshest judgmentalism, and our arrogance, they're left behind so that an authentic, a self-giving love can actually become the new reality. You see, for me, and this is Matt Stone talking, maybe you'd say it differently. I know this: the more I know Jesus, the more I actually encounter him, the more I experience him, the more I am compelled by the way that he lived and the way that he loved. He is the Word made flesh, and he's written in my heart. And I can't deny that. And the truth is that I'm finding that his way of living, as I participate with that more, and as I journey with him farther, it's more truer than it was yesterday. But I can't make you experience that. But that's my experience, and I want that for everybody. And I know those of you who have encountered Jesus regularly, you want that for others too. See, loving people in theory sounds so easy. But in real time, we know it just gets very messy really quickly because love is a verb. And our way of living here in the 21st century church is quite a bit different from how Jesus lived. He interacted with people like Zacchaeus, who we talked about last week, one of my favorite accounts in the Bible. I mean, think about that. That community despised Zacchaeus. And yet Jesus invited himself over for dinner, which is hilarious. Jesus just like, hey, I'm dropping by, coming in for dinner. You See, Jesus frequented the tables and the homes of the people who were very different from him. People that religious men and women wouldn't want to be seen with. And Jesus bonded with these people that others tried to ignore. He actually had authentic relationships with them. He learned their names. He listened to their stories. He shared meals with them. And then when he challenged them with real love and truth. Now, some of the people Jesus crossed paths with didn't instantly get things squared away, did they? They didn't instantly just always start living that good Christ-like lives after meeting Jesus. Some did. Some that didn't just instantly happen. Many stayed complicated. And some of them stayed really complicated. But you know what? Jesus loved them. And he expressed love to them with his words, absolutely, that we get recorded, but with his actions. And this truth we read about in the Bible is still true today. Is that people don't come to faith because of our right beliefs and our right doctrines being shared with them. That's a big statement. I want to say it one more time. People don't come to faith because of our right beliefs and our right doctrine being shared with them. I wish that were the case, because then it would be nice, it'd be tidy, it'd be like that stable without any animals. It'd be really clean. We could hand them the tracts that maybe some of you grew up around that are the 4 spiritual laws in the Romans Road. We could hand them that, and that would be enough. Rather, this is what I know, folks. This is what my experience tells me. This is what the Bible reveals to us, is that people come to faith because they experience Jesus Christ. And an amazing part of that is that one of the most sincere ways that Jesus' love is experienced up close and personal is through you and me. It's through us. Love wasn't just a theory for Jesus. It was his reason for being human, for living with and moving in and around people and then moving through the lives of others. For God so loved. Just over a year ago, I started a new habit. It's a good habit. I started smoking delicious meats. If you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, if we're friends there, you've seen a lot. Yeah, I had to play that out just a tiny bit there. But smoking delicious meats. And I think that loving people in the way of Jesus is a lot like eating really good barbecue. Now follow me with this. Now if you've had some really good, smoked barbecue recently, you know as well as I do that there is just no way to eat all of that deliciousness and stay all tidy and all clean. It doesn't happen. I mean, just think about this. You got pulled pork. I'm showing you pictures, folks. Look at that bark. That's called bark. The dark black, that's the smoke. Oh, whew. We got brisket. Oh, look at that smoke ring. That's what that little pink edge is. Jesse, is this torch? Sorry, buddy. Sorry. We got chicken wings. Oh, some good smoked chicken wings. Love that. How about some jalapeno poppers? Next picture. Ooh, those are one of my favorites. And then the last, those are jalapeno peppers wrapped in bacon and smoked there, yes. And then last one, how about ribs? Some really good ribs. You see, just like there is no way to eat this delicious barbecue and stay clean, there's definitely no clean way to love others. It is just untidy business. In his book, The 4 Loves, C.S. Lewis says it like this. This quote, folks, if you get one thing today, and I already posted it this week on my Facebook page, this is worth sitting with. He says this, C.S. Lewis. He says, there is no safe investment. To love it all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even to an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. and lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. I'm glad C.S. Lewis said that. That is not Matt Stone original, because that cuts a little bit. Now, I know it can be overwhelming, and maybe for you, like me, sometimes it's even frightening to consider the cost of relationships, to consider the cost of truly working to love and care for others the way you do yourself. But it doesn't have to be overwhelming and frightening. This is the way that Mother Teresa dealt with these feelings of the work being a bit crushing. And she said it like this. She says, never worry about numbers. And it should be up there on the screen. She says, never worry about numbers. Help one person at a time. And this is what I love. And always start with the person nearest you. We've talked a lot over the months about proximity. And she's reminding us here, it's good. Start with those who are nearest you. See, love stops being just a nice idea or a nice philosophy when we start loving people around us. When love becomes an actual verb, it becomes an action, it is a bit jarring at times because here's the reality. We put our weakness and our weaknesses on full display. In order to love someone well and to love them like you love yourself, you will have to be vulnerable. Your weaknesses, all that you are, the goods and the bads, are on full display. But in that, we also experience the power of God working through us even in our most feeble moments. You know what? Maybe that's just the way it's supposed to be. Maybe that vulnerability, that courage it takes, that's just how it's supposed to be. I mean, if Jesus can leave his divine throne to take on the humble nature of a servant, to show us a better way to live, and then to give himself up in order to reconcile us back to God the Father, then maybe this whole loving others like we love ourselves is actually the real freedom that we all seek. I mean, I think that Jesus knew, and he still knows, that the greatest command to love God and to love others as yourself is actually the path to the fullest life. So in an attempt to not make this all just a bunch of love theory and ideas, I want to present us with one actionable step that can help us move from just theorizing about loving our neighbors and begin to actually love others in the way of Jesus. And this is going to sound, before Dave, you put that up there, this is going to sound counterintuitive. He put it up there. It's okay. It's going to sound a little counterintuitive. But it's through better action by slowing down. There's a 2013 neuroscience study, and I won't give you all the details, but you can find this out there. Okay, this researchers, they found that self-centeredness, not compassion, not understanding, is actually the default setting of the human brain. And I think that's something that we're all aware of if we'll be a little bit honest, right? Self-centeredness, not caring, not understanding, okay, not compassion, is actually our default. However, we do have this part of our brain that keeps us from always acting on our self-interest. And that part of the brain is called, and hang on here, is called the supramarginal gyrus. It's the right supramarginal gyrus. I'll say it only one more time later. And specifically, that part of our brain actually helps us recognize what's going on with others and then respond with empathy and with care. So what I find really interesting about this research is that this right supramarginal gyrus, last time I'm saying that, functions slower than our more selfish parts of our brain. And these researchers found that when we are distracted or when we have to make a bunch of hurried decisions, our capacity for compassion and understanding is actually significantly reduced. Basically, our empathy center in our brain can't keep up. So what I'm getting at here is that developing a deeper love of neighbor and squashing our insensitivity towards others requires a focused attention on slowing down. And the good news is, we've been talking about this, right? We've been talking a lot. You've heard me say self-awareness, talk about reflection. We've been talking about listening a lot. And there's more good news, is that all of these kind of focuses have been part of the Christian faith since the beginning. It's like Jesus actually knew that prayer and thanksgiving and meditation and stillness and silence are the exact things that we all need in order to strengthen this part of our brain that could actually move us into more love and more care and more compassion. It's like Jesus is saying, you know all those 613 commandments that you've been really busy trying to keep? That huge to-do list? Well, how about just two things? How about you slow down and you remember those two commandments? And this is really, folks, why we even gather here today on a Sunday morning, right? I know there's a lot of hustle and bustle to get out of the house, to get here. Those that are still watching in their PJs, you got it made today, don't you? But it's why we take a breather of sorts and we have a rest and we come together to worship. It should be a slowing down, an intentional focus on getting rid of our frenetic day-to-day movements so that we can reflect, so that we can actually remember, and then we begin to build up our brains so that we might be a more thoughtful and a more empathetic people. In other words, hear this. The enduring practices of the Christian life are rightly designed to move us to love God and to love others as ourselves. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Now, I know in our current reality, it seems that everything is either, maybe we'll give them a little credit, unintentionally or intentionally, okay, designed to do the opposite of what Jesus is commanding. Okay, social media provokes us to to counter each other instead of to consider one another. Our phones, they flood us with this constant opportunity for external stimulation without the thought of how it's producing an internal transformation. Basically, we all know this. We live at a blistering pace of productivity with minimal stillness. And I know that through conversations I've had with all of you and through listening to different folks, whether it's at the coffee shop or just maybe it's in line at, I won't name the store because I always name that store in every sermon. But I know through that all of us are experiencing how our society has been increasingly more fearful, more angry, more divided, more unable to compromise. And then when we consider this information about our brains in light of Christ's teachings, I mean, is it any wonder why we are seeing the consequences of this path that we have followed? See, if you and I, if we really want to grow in our love of God, if we really desire to develop a deep love of others and to see a more compassionate humanity, it's going to take better action by slowing down. This morning, because there's no better way to do this than to actually put it into practice here for just a moment, I want to invite you guys to just slow down for just a little longer this morning. This is part of why I've known about this study for a while. I just never knew where it would work into a message, and it did today. But we've been intentional during our prayer time, and you guys know this because we're doing this each week, but trying to begin with some stillness and some silence. Because there's some way, this connection with our brains, that develops a better love of God and a love of others. And so right here, right now, I want to spend just a little longer in some stillness with you. Now, when you're in a group of people, it's a little harder to have silence, and so there'll be some coughing. I'm sure there'll be a little of that. But I want to invite you to do this. Maybe you're here this morning and you know that, boy, lately, I'm just not feeling this whole faith thing. I haven't been experiencing a lot of freshness with God. And so During this time, I would encourage you to settle into that a little bit. Begin to commune with God about building in you a deeper faith that would remind you of the goodness. But maybe you are at a spot right now where there's some tension with your neighbor. There's some tension with loving others as you love yourself. And so for the next minute or so here in stillness and silence, I'd invite you to picture that person. Begin to pray that God would help you love them well, to lead with understanding and empathy and care and compassion instead of just self-centered desires. So we're going to take just about a minute or two. Promise I won't keep you too long. But just let's settle into a little bit of stillness here together. And we'll see what the Lord might have to reveal to us.